So welcome everybody. Really excited that we had so much interest in this webinar discussing streamlining the grants management processes for nonprofits. Particularly during COVID times, normally we're doing these in person, but really appreciate how many folks were interested. I think this will be a really great topic. And of course, Alaska nonprofits in general are, sorry, it looks like we're having just a quick technical issue got resolved. I know during COVID times, this has been particularly challenging in hitting our NFP organizations more than others. And so I just wanted to extend, our support and appreciation for all the work you're doing. There will be two other folks presenting today along with me. Eric Ward, who is one of the founders of Sockeye, has worked extensively with not-for-profits here in Alaska and the lower 48 over the last 14 years. And then Esther Goodstein will be actually presenting on the demo today. She has worked with a lot of our not-for-profit customers last 2 years at Sockeye, as well as previously as an auditor. So has a lot of firsthand experience, and we're really excited to be able to show some of the improvements we've been making and seeing with our customers, particularly around the grants management functionality. So as we get into this, here's our agenda for today, where I promise we're not going to spend a lot of time on slides, but there is a few items that I think will be helpful just in sort of setting the stage for Esther's demonstration. So we're just going to introduce a little bit about Sockeye. Eric's going to talk a little bit about the advancements in technology that have really impacted the ability of what we're able to deliver for not-profits around their grant reporting in particular. And then of course the demo, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. And sort of on that topic, I will be monitoring the Q&A. If you have a question during the course of the presentation, feel free to use the chat tool. We'll be monitoring that, and really towards the end of it, we'll probably be opening it up for more Q&A, but I encourage you, as something comes up while it's top of mind, feel free to use that. And I'll ensure once we get through the slides here that Q&A feature is enabled and available for any questions that come up. So a little bit about Sockeye, for those of you who don't know us, we are a consulting firm headquartered here in Anchorage, Alaska, and we're established in 2007. Since the beginning of our firm, we've been supporting both for-profit and not-for-profits. We're particularly passionate about the not-for-profit base and all of the great work that goes on in this state that often goes unrecognized. Our firm historically has been a Microsoft partner supporting accounting systems, and over the last 4 years really picked up a product called Sage Intacct, which is the tool we're going to be really demonstrating today and telling the story of today. We're one of 8 partners in the world that are considered a premier partner on this product. And that really is a testament to all the great work Eric and Esther and team have done in establishing best practices, really high customer support and retention. And so we're really proud to be able to say, headquartered here in Alaska, we're doing things on a national level that get recognized. The types of nonprofits we're supporting range anywhere from foundations, a lot of healthcare, particularly in Alaska, a lot of social services and tribal not-for-profits. And the tool set that we're going to be showing today is pretty agnostic and will span all of those different types of not-for-profits. Particularly what we're going to be focusing on today is really the grant management aspects and some of the reporting capabilities that historically have been pretty challenging to achieve within the accounting system. So as we sort of, transition, just to give everybody and sort of level set on what Sage Intacct is, fundamentally, it's really just a cloud accounting system. And this product, I know a lot of folks within the NFP space have heard of Sage. This product, Sage Intacct, was a product that Sage acquired in 2017. And so if you've had maybe experience previously on Sage, I think MIP was owned by Sage at one point, and Sage 50 and some of those other products. This is a very different product than all of those. It has grant management capabilities that are much more dynamic. It's a fully cloud product. And so as Eric and Esther get into the presentation a little bit more, we'll highlight those differences as well. A couple things else that I think are kind of important to point out here is, when we picked up this product in 2017, we were really interested in, what the future of cloud accounting would look like for both our for-profit and not-for-profit customer bases. One of the things we really latched onto was Sage Intacct's rating from other end users of the product was by, heads above any other cloud accounting system in the market. And that spoke to us, and really in terms of an NFP space, there's limited budgets. There are limited technical capabilities for some of the smaller not-for-profits. And the more you can get done, within a tool set that makes sense, that's built for an accountant, the better off you're going to be. And it's one of the areas that we think, really Sage Intacct really shines with. And, just as kind of a testament to that, there are, about 40% of Sage Intacct's customers are in the not-for-profit space. And that is by far the largest percentage of any particular industry within Sage Intacct. And you can see here just sort of a smattering of some of the logos. These are companies that have been utilizing Sage Intacct. And we're really proud to say that, some of the most successful not-for-profits in the state have been utilizing it and really seeing some pretty impactful results. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Eric Ward, and he's just going to give you maybe his thoughts. Eric leads has historically led our ERP or accounting software division. And I just wanted him to share a few thoughts as to why we really adopted this product and where we see it being sort of a differentiator for a lot of our not-for-profit customers. So Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. All right. So just to give like Nick said, a quick introduction of why Sockeye chose Sage Intacct and why we looked at Sage Intacct as a leader in an application that will lead our business to be able to service our clients. One is the move to the cloud. This is an important aspect of Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct was built on the cloud for the cloud. And what that means is it wasn't retrofit for the cloud, but it was built on some other platform and then enabled to go to the cloud. But instead, it was using cloud technology from the get-go, from the start of the application. And that allows us to, allowed Intacct to be able to leverage all the technology that has come along with the cloud. This is also a big change in how we think and deliver and use our applications. More and more we see applications or companies getting affected by ransomware or viruses with their data on premise. And this cloud and being in a cloud environment expands the IT team that secures and protects that data. So the cloud accounting shift has been a big one in terms of the use of technology. It also allows features to be rolled out much faster and the application itself to be able to advance at a much faster rate and users be able to use those features immediately instead of waiting for periodic upgrades.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, one of the big things we found when COVID hit was those organizations that were still sort of an on-premise accounting software package, your traditional software packages, they ended up having to think about things like check printing and signatures and how do we accomplish all those things. And for those people who had moved to the cloud, that was all sort of baked into the product. It became very easy to transition, at least from a software perspective, easy to transition to remote work.
A second great feature is the reporting within the user interface. at the time when Sage Intacct was first developed, this was a novel concept where other applications hadn't even considered it. And it was from the original creation of the application, they set forth to be able to report using transactional data. What that means is that as reporting is happening real time. So as you post transactions, as you enter in transactions, those immediately affect the reports that you're running. So real-time data, and this was really I think this was really a visionary aspect of the application, because technology has now come along to be able to support all of that much faster. Now other applications that have been designed to have separate reporting databases or separate reporting functions are kind of stuck in that era of separate databases for that. Now Intacct is, like I said, it's real time, and that allows us to drill back to the transactions right from the reports immediately and be able to function from that aspect much more effectively. All right. Just having a technical difficulty here.
It's okay. And then the last point here, which I think is a really important one, is the simple UI that empowers accountants. And really what that means is giving accountants the tools to be able to do things like, build their own reports, for example. So the idea of being able to drag in a field, have it automatically published on a report, the ability to set workflows. So spending limits, for example, if I wanted to do a purchase order, having the ability to set thresholds for different approval limits. And those are sort of things that, some of the higher end, more expensive accounting systems would allow you to do. Oftentimes it would take IT support in order to really accomplish those things. Those are things that are, with the invention of more cloud-based applications like Sage Intacct, you've been able to turn that into really an empowerment of the accountant. So with that, we're going to be shifting over to Esther. And Esther, I know your video is not on. It will be when I turn it over to the demo portion. But I know you want to just sort of set the stage for what we're going to be covering in this demo.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nick. So today for my demo, I'm going to go over a few different features within Intacct. The first being the grants module itself and how it can be configured to be used for grant management and grant accounting. And from there, I'm going to show you how that configuration can then flow into the actual reporting in Intacct and give you the ability to generate very specific grant reports out of the system. And then we're going to look at how Intacct can be configured to automatically run in your indirect cost calculations and post them into the system for reporting. And then I'll show you where Intacct has the ability to create unique reporting periods in order for you to make unique reports that may not match up with your fiscal year end or calendar year end. And then we'll do the Q&A after that.
Right.
I am ready to share my screen.
All right, let me just enable that for you. Bear with us for 1 second. Okay, Esther, you should be a host now and ready to present.
Yeah, there's my camera too. Cool. So let me share my screen for you. All right, so what we have up here is my demo company. And this shows what my user sees when logging into the system. This is called a grant manager dashboard. So this gives me the ability to get a snapshot of what's going on with the grants right from the get-go when logging in. One of the cool features about Intacct is that it is all web browser based. So as long as you have an internet connection or hotspot and then a web browser or even a phone, you can log into the system wherever you are. It is set up, as Eric said, to be able to do approvals even from your phone when needed for your purchasing or AP bills. Another really neat feature about Intacct, it's easy to navigate, and it also has a really robust help and support section here. So any page you're on within the system, you can go to the help on this page, and it'll create a, it'll bring you to a help center article based on the page you're on, as well as any related topics to what you might be searching for. So when navigating an Intacct, on selecting applications, you can see all the modules that you have access to from this menu here. And this may be different depending on the user who's logging into the system. For example, an accounts payable technician, when they log into this company, they may only see their accounts payable module, because that's all they need. But for my user having access to all the modules, it can make this menu a bit cluttered. So when I navigate throughout the system, I actually use another feature that's available called the favorites menu. And so from here, we're gonna go ahead and navigate to the projects or grants module itself. And so what this is the module where the grants live in. This name itself, this terminology is actually very configurable. It can be renamed to whatever terminology fits with your organization. We've had clients change that to be called funds instead, or grants. I've chose to keep this as called projects or grants, so that to really highlight the fact that you can track both projects and grants in this module as needed by your organization.
We see that, and that's exactly right. And one of the things we see that in nonprofits that have things like construction projects, if you're a housing authority, for an example, being able to track both, the grant side of it as well as projects within this gives you a lot better level of detail as you're sort of breaking down in your financial reports.
Yeah, absolutely. And so today, though, we're going to focus on the grants. So I'm actually going to come up here, and this is called a list view. And these list views give you a basic list of all your active activity. And from this type, I can tell what's projects, what's grants. But I also have the ability to create custom list views. And I'm going to go and go to one of the custom list views that I've created before, called Grant Info View. So what this does a few things when I select that custom view is the first thing it does is it actually filters out this project or grant type. That way I'm only looking at my my grants, and that way I'm not cluttering my view with other projects or other types of activity. The other thing that happens when I select that custom view is it generates all these extra columns that are only related to my grants. So I can get a snapshot of what all active grants I have in my system and what relevant information we might have on that grant entered into the system. So from here, we're going to actually dive into one of these grants so you can see how this information populates. I'm going to go ahead and press edit on this Holcomb grant here. And right off the bat, you can see there's a lot of information in these project and grant cards. There's lots of different tabs that can be used, and that's because it is a module that is fully functioning for both projects and grants. So there may be tabs in here that aren't applicable to grants that are applicable for projects, and then vice versa. What I really want to focus on, though, in this area is this grant info tab we have on the back here. This tab is specifically all grant information, and it's not a tab that actually comes with the system out of the box. It's a tab that we at Sockeye actually add this tab and customize it to meet the needs of the nonprofit or other organizations. So everything in this tab is configurable. It's including all the fields, the groups fields, and even the terminology for each of these fields. And what's really cool about having this tab in here with these different fields is that everything that's entered in here, all this information can be used in other parts of the system. And so if we take, for example, the CAFTA number here, we can, with having this CAFTA in the system, we'll be able to generate a SEFA with that information available. Also, with the indirect cost rate percentage being in here, we can then use that to calculate our indirect cost later on. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and show you the reporting that can be used based off this information. Instead of navigating away from this page, I'm going to go ahead and create a new tab here. Oh, there's one more thing I forgot to show you. Another really cool part about this card is in this additional info tab, there's this feature called attachments. And this actually is available in most records in the system. And it gives you the ability to attach electronic documents to the record to be able to view, to be able to be stored with it and to be viewed later. And for example, if I just take something off my desktop here and drag it over and put it in there, it'll automatically update it. So you don't have to go browsing for your documents as long if you know where they are, you can just drag and drop. If you've already added the attachment into the system, you can also choose it from a pick list too by showing you're unattached and finding it there. Once the attachment is in the system, you can see this paperclip here. You can view the attachment and open it up and see what's in it, which this is just going to be a blank document, but if there was information, it would show up in there. And so once I save this, then it'll stay with that record the next time I go into that grant. So then moving on to reporting. Actually, I'm going to use my favorites to navigate to my financial reports. And so in this is the financial reports module, and there's a lot of reports in here, and that's pretty common for there to be a lot of reports because there's lots of different ways we can customize these. And what Intacct has done is added a feature for people to use to organize and name the report types and report audiences. So these two fields, report type and report audience, are both user-defined fields so that you can then create report types and names that make sense for your organization to organize your financial reports. So I'm looking for a specific report. I'm going to go ahead and type it in. Actually, I only need to type it because I've typed it before. And I'm going to press enter. And so the one report I'm looking for comes up automatically. And so from here, I have a few options when I actually wanted to generate this report. We have the HTML option, which will bring it up as a new tab. But then we also have other options that allow you to download this report to save onto your desktop or shared drive or to email on to someone else. For this, we're going to go ahead and just keep it in HTML. When I select it, it gives me a couple of prompts. This organization, this demo company, it has a 9/30 year end, so I'm going to go ahead and do it for that year end. And so then it generates the SEFA. And there's a few things I really want to note about the SEFA that I think are pretty cool. First of all, these four columns here, those are all custom fields that came in from the grant itself. So we have that CAFTA number for the Holcomb grant at 94.862. That actually is coming from this custom field that we put in that grant info tab. The other neat thing about this is that because of those custom fields, we're able to also filter this report in the background to only ever show grants that belong on the SEFA. So you're not accidentally having other state grants or private funding showing up on this report. And then one other part that's really neat about these reports is that anywhere there's a blue hyperlink, you can actually drill down to the transactions themselves and see what was tagged with that grant. So if I click on this expenditures number there, it actually brings up the GL detail for that makes up that amount on the SEFA. And even from here, I can drill down even further to the transaction itself and to the bill that was originally created that's showing up on the SEFA. And so this is the bill that is part of this bill is showing up in the SEFA as part in the Holcomb grant. And I also, if there's someone attached backup to this bill, I now have the ability to look at that backup, which in this case will just be another blank document. And then once you're done drilling down into this information after doing research, you can then just exit out of that and you're back into your report again. So there's another report I want to show you while we're in this area. It's another federal grant report, and it's the federal grant reporting for the current month. So when I run this report, it's gonna have a bit of a different format, but it's gonna show the same grants. And this time, since it's by month, I'm actually gonna do it for August. And so it's showing those same grants, those federal grants that are on the SEFA, because once again, it's filtering in the background, but it's giving it to you in a P&L format. And one extra addition that's in August right now is that it has the indirect costs are in the system, both indirect costs and recovery. And this is done by that allocation that we're going to go over next. This bottom row, the indirect cost check figure, is actually a calculation ensuring that this is the correct amount. This amount is actually bringing it to the correct percentage for that indirect cost rate. And so that gives us the ability, if we look at Holcomb grant again, we have that 10.08% indirect cost rate. we can go back to our grant and make sure that it actually is 10.08% as a quick check to make sure that's correct for that grant. So now if I then change this to be for 9/30/2020, maybe that's the year that we're working on, or the month that we're working on closing. You'll notice the differences are this one's missing that indirect cost expense and missing that check figure, which means it's time to run that allocation for this month. And that's what we're going to do next.
I had a question that came in here, Esther.
Yeah.
How, with your experience with companies that are using Intacct, how do you find that the question is, do you find that they take an existing report that you've created and then tweak it after that, or are they creating their own reports, or how does that look?
It's usually a little bit of a mixture. We usually ask for example reports that are really important to their organization. And sometimes we'll help them make the report if they want to be hands-on and make the report themselves, or we'll make a report that is similar within the system. And sometimes they find they don't need those reports anymore because we can actually use list views and other types of aspects of the system to meet that same need.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and run an allocation for 9/30/2020. I'm going to come into here, and then I'm going to go back to my favorites and come to my allocations page. So in this screen, in order to run allocation, I want to put in the date I'm doing it for. And in this company, we do the indirect allocation or indirect cost rate calculation monthly. But this can be really any reporting period that's used. I'm selecting a group allocation, and then I'm going to go ahead and select my allocations. And this brings up a list of the allocations that are going to be run. And these are based off the percentages that are used by the grants within the system. So there'll be a different allocation for each indirect cost rate percentage used. And then from here, I just press generate. And it kicks me to the allocation log and tells me it's in queue. And so when that process is done running, I'll get an email similar to this one. And it will tell me what failed, what didn't fail. And in this case, 2 of them succeeded and 1 failed. But a failure is expected because there was no grants with 12% on it. So this was an expected result, and it looks like the ones that we actually have percentages for, it successfully create that allocation calculation for us. And
so, Esther, we do have a question on this topic: is what happens when we run the allocation and then costs come in after we run the allocation? So the actual allocation amounts would change in this case?
That's a great question. And so that when that happens, you can simply just delete the allocation and rerun it, or depending on how it's configured, you can rerun that allocation, and it will the system will either reverse the allocation and redo it, or it can actually do what's called a delta true up, where it'll create a new allocation for the difference. And that's something that's actually a really good point about allocations, is that when you're running these allocations and calculating them and posting them into the system, it's not going directly into your accrual book. So you're not immediately getting those amounts recorded in your actual books. It's going into what's called a user-defined book. And that gives you the flexibility to review it, to change it, to redo it as needed before bringing it into your GL by duplicating the journal entry.
So maybe pausing there for just a second to kind of level set. There's Intacct has multiple books, right? Your accrual book, and then you have additional books you can use for like your example.
Yeah. So, and there's a couple ways to handle it. I think this is done now. So when I have my report on here, this is actually bringing in 2 different books. So instead of duplicating that allocation that just finished running, from my allocations book, I am choosing to report to basically to transpose that accrual book over the allocations book over the accrual book. So I don't have to bring it in my GL at all if I don't want to.
Gotcha.
I have another follow-up question on this indirect, Esther, is what happens on your example here it was a monthly indirect rate that got posted. If you're looking at the year to date or over the term of the contract, and it's looking at the total year for an indirect rate, is there a way to mass update all the costs based off of the annual cost incurred for the allocation for the indirect.
You could, so yes, you could have your monthly allocations, and then you could create another allocation that does it for the whole year to true up any differences. So that is a possibility.
Also a question, kind of a statement question. So the allocation is based off flagging the grant / project by their percentage?
Yeah, so and there's a few ways to configure it, but the way I have it configured in this environment is that on each grant, I track what the percentage rate is, and then I'm actually creating groups of grants with this percentage being the filter. And then, so then the allocation is looking for grants that have that attribute. And that's how it's running the allocation.
Okay.
Any other questions for move on?
Let me look.
Nope, I think we've answered them all.
Yep.
Okay. And then one other thing I didn't know earlier is that when these allocations are run and that journal entries run, it's already configured to hit your indirect cost expense and then your revenue, in this case the revenue recovery account, and those are set to run each time that way. So yeah, so this is 9/30/2020, and this allocation is done with these extra added report lines, and then we have our check figure down here to make sure that it's correct. All right, so from here, I'm gonna go into showing the unique reporting periods within Intacct, and to do that, I'm actually gonna go back to my dashboard. So in my dashboard here, I have this what's called the state grant reporting for an annual state grant report. Let's take a little closer look into that. And so this report is doing a few things. The most important though part about this is it's state grant year end. This is an actual unique reporting period that was added into the system so that I can make a report. In this case, submitting a state grant report for the state's year end rather than the fiscal year end of 9/30/2020 or the calendar year end of 2020 for these grants. And just like the other reports, this report is filtering for state grants. So it's only bringing in the ones that have the attributes related to needing to be on this report. So this gives me the ability to have this report updated and update it once a year to report for this reporting period. And I think that was all I wanted to show on that, unless there's more questions in regards to the reporting.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I wanted to show today as some of the features for Intacct, and for some general questions. I think we can take them now.
Yeah, so a couple questions, other questions that had came in. One of the questions, I don't know if this got to me or if it was to the whole group, was specifically around integration capabilities. I can take this one. Kind of the integration capabilities to other systems. This is something we see often. It's one of the real strengths of Sage Intacct, being able to connect either through an API or using a file import process, bring in data from other systems. We see that from sometimes we have customers with a different granting or donation database. Same thing with payroll and HRIS systems. So Intacct has a marketplace with well over 200 other types of software like expense management, sort of you name it, that you have the ability to integrate seamlessly between the two systems. And most of the time what we see, most of our customers have anywhere from 2 to as many as a dozen different systems we're integrating to, and that's pretty commonplace these days.
There was a question, Esther, maybe you can talk to this about giving data, forecasting giving data. So this specific example would be if we have giving schedules set up, or we know what our giving is going to look like, can we do a forecast on kind of that revenue or cash flow perspective based off of our giving expectations for the year?
Absolutely. So that's another great use of the user-defined books. So actually, I'll show you in here, we have these user-defined books. If I come to General Ledger, in your user-defined books here. So these are different books that are in the system. So this allocations book is what's being used for the dynamic allocations. We have a book set up for commitments, which in purchasing, if you have a commitment step, you can use that. But then another common one that gets built is a forecasting user-defined book. So then you could put in the journal entries for those giving schedules that you're budgeting for, and actually run those numbers either on top of your accrual books or completely independently to see what that's going to look like for the time period.
Great. There's another question that came in regarding the dashboards and the ability to sort of customize those based off role. Could you maybe show us or talk a little bit more about sort of what that looks like? I know it's a new concept to a lot of people. You have both graphs. It looks like some statistical information here. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and so I actually I built this this dashboard just for this presentation, within in mind that this would be for maybe a grant manager. So it's easy to add components to a dashboard, and it's easy to customize them for different roles. So if I come here to the actual dashboards list, these are all the dashboards that are available in the system. And but there's the ability to assign them only to certain people. So maybe if we come into our grants dashboard and edit it, we can say who should and should not be allowed to be in here based off whether they're the user, or if we have a group created, we can allow a group of people to see it and no one else. So the dashboards have a lot of flexibility in what you report on them and who can actually see and use them.
Gotcha.
I think a good thing to point out here too is that when we look at applications, one of the things that we really like about Intacct is the ability for accounting users with access, of course, to be able to design and add to these dashboards. This doesn't require any IT expertise to be able to design and build these dashboards, but really just understanding your chart of accounts and knowing what it is that you want to see, and then you can add that information to the dashboard.
That's great. And so this is a grant manager dashboard. So if I wanted to just see one grant, for example, like a specific grant, and then metrics around that, is there a way to do that from this?
Yeah, so up here this dashboard has the ability to filter. So if I really just wanted to filter this down to take a look at one grant, or maybe I just want to see a group of grants that might be reported on my SEFA, I can apply this filter, and these metrics change because it's looking at the statistical data that was attached to those grants, and then then everything else so apparently all this information was probably for state grants. But it filters it out. Let's see if we can find another one here that actually gives some data. But this dashboard basically can be filtered to show data for specific grants or group of grants as needed. Or you can have dashboards set up with the filters already in place.
Got it. And for those organizations that have multiple maybe entities or EINs, could you talk a little bit about what that looks like if there's multiple legal entities as part of their organization?
Yeah, so Intacct does a really good job of managing a multi-entity company, and that's with this option up here, we have the ability to slide into any entity that's related to this company. So each of these would be considered their own EIN entity, and then we could, if we went into one of these, we could slide in, and it would be on its own information. You'd only see the information that's related to this entity. And then you could only transact with information that's related to this entity when actually creating transactions in here. And then all of it rolls up to the what's called the top level for reporting.
So sort of inversely then, if you're at the top level, you can transact across all of the entities underneath it.
Yeah, at the top level, it's really easy to transact again across multiple entities by using what we call tagging. So if you're creating a bill and you want to go across a few different, well, this is called funds in here, but this is the entities / locations. You just tag each entity that's related to that. So maybe you're doing like an insurance, paying for an insurance bill where you allocate it across multiple entities. You could do that easily from the top level.
Great. Just taking a look at questions. I think we have most of them covered. We wanted to be pretty precise with it. It looks like you accomplished that, Esther, so that was great. So what I will do, if there's no other questions, I'm just going to take back control here.
Okay.
So I might need you to just grant that back to me.
Yeah, there you go. Make host.
Great. And so I'm just going to kind of just wrap up and wanted to just thank everybody for attending. I actually, we had a handful of people who had reached out after saying they'd like to get a copy of this recording. We did record this, and we'll make that available to everybody as it comes in. One other question while we still have some time, I guess. There's a question about showing AP approvals or just showing like approval process. Do you have that built in to be able to show?
I could do a whole nother demo on that. I don't really have that built into this demo, but that's definitely something I could do another, or if they want to get a demo, I could get with them and show that person. But unless Eric has something set up to show, I currently don't at the moment.
Yeah, I can speak to it just briefly, and yeah, we certainly can do that. Approvals can be done electronically. So oftentimes what we see, from a AP perspective or PO perspective, we may create a purchase order. There may be approval authorities based off of, what grant that is, what department. There may be a spending authority within that. You have the ability to get pretty granular and go through approval hierarchies that are driven off of, what department you're in, what program, et cetera. So another question, when you're creating the financial report writer, how did you pull the attribute into the columns? So maybe I'll let you take that back over, because I think that is something a lot of people would be interested in. Let me give you you control to do that again.
So you want to see how the attribute is actually coming into the financial report?
Yeah, I think it's really how do you like design those reports to take those attributes in? So I'm making you a host right now, Esther.
There we go. All right, let me get my screen back up. There it is. So if we actually go into the guts of the report themselves, let's go into that SEFA.
I don't think you're screen sharing just yet.
Oh, hey, I forgot to press OK.
No problem.
Share. There we go. All right, so I'm on the SEFA here. If I go in to edit this report instead, it brings me to all the options that are being displayed in here. So it tells me what dimensions I'm using, and then so in the columns here is actually where I'm bringing in each of these different configured fields from the grant itself. So if we come back and look at this CAFTA field, I'm telling it that I want to see a dimension attribute from the project or grant module, and then selecting the attribute here. So everything that was listed in that project or grant card that we looked at earlier is also on this list as an attribute to be reported on the financial report itself.
Yeah. And this is a really, and this idea, you know, we supported Dynamics Great Plains for 14 years. This idea of being able to create fields, publish those fields and then have them available to report on within the UI, which is something with these legacy older systems we weren't able to do. So this seems like it should always have been the case, very simple, but oftentimes that was a exercise in exporting it to Excel to be able to accomplish. See the question here. So it's applicable in the account report structure, or it isn't applicable in the accounts report structure. I'm not entirely sure what, if I understand that question correctly.
I think what they're probably asking is that you don't have to have the information that you're showing, like the funding agency name isn't in the account report structure. In Intacct, we have, these are called dimensions. They're different. Instead of having a segment of an account number, they're different dimensions of a transaction that you code to. So the attributes on that dimension, so the different fields, so the dimension here is the grant, and the different fields or attributes on that grant are accessible in the financial reports. This is something that's not typical for most accounting systems, is you're not pulling that data and having it accessible in a financial report, but in Intacct, all of those fields are available to pull onto the report.
Gotcha. And it looks like you just confirmed that was what the question was, Eric.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions while we have Esther back in the application? I'll give it just maybe 15 seconds or so, and then we can wrap. Esther, I appreciate you spending the time to do this. I know, Esther works almost exclusively with her not-for-profit customers. She's very passionate, like we all are, her extra so with the NFP world. And like we were saying earlier, we're happy to answer any other questions. I know it's kind of a lot to take in, and there's some big concepts here. I really appreciate everybody's attendance, all the great questions. And we wish all of you and your organizations and your family a really great holidays and on to better 2021. So with that, I think we'll wrap. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And oh, I have one other question from Raj that came through. I'll just pull that up real quick. Is there a revenue recognition automated for the grants?
Yeah, so there's a whole extra feature for revenue recognition, which I didn't really touch on today, but there is the ability to set up revenue recognition for grants. We can go over that on another webinar, maybe.
Well, we got a lot of content
Yeah.
put together. And I expect that's a great question. And that's one that again is one of those things that haven't been typically, that's a manual process. And there's a module specifically for that revenue recognition. So great question, Raj. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody, and take care.